Hello. Today we have two pieces of content that I want to talk about, but they're closely related. So one is Philosophy Bites podcast, and another is a Brain Pickings article. I'll link both of them below as usual. So I'll mostly talk about the podcast because I tend to learn better when I'm listening to things, and so I got a lot more out of the podcast. And they're like I said, they're closely related. So this podcast is the hosts have talked to quite a few philosophers over the years. And so they've compiled basically a list of these answers of what is philosophy. So coming from philosophers, obviously you're going to kind of get some of those philosophy answers where it's like kind of dodging around the question and coming at it from a different direction. Philosophizing over the question. No question is too great to be philosophized over. So one of the biggest takeaways that I had was there are a lot more different kinds of philosophies than I originally thought. So after just like a brief Wikipedia search, so there's philosophy of education, history, language, law, mathematics, mind, politics, religion, science, and the list goes on. So inside of this podcast, there are philosophers from all different gamuts. So there's a ton of different thoughts and ideas that go into this go into this question of what is philosophy. So I started thinking, after listening to all of these people's ideas of what philosophy is, what is kind of my takeaway from philosophy? I've only really been looking into it for a little while, maybe a week or so. But I thought, what is philosophy to me? How do I perceive it? So just going back to the Greek definition of philosophy, what is philosophy is philo is basically the Greek word meaning love or loving. And then Sophie is knowledge. So just translated like that, philosophy is the love of knowledge. So in that sense, I like it. I think I can really get behind philosophy and really wanting to gain knowledge in things. The way, though, that I think that I would describe most philosophy is that it's, I guess, human wisdom that sounds divine. So we as humans, I think, play into it is a very prideful way of thinking, oh, most people think inside this box, so I'm going to expand it. But what I think a lot of philosophers don't realize is that even in this expanding, they're still inside this bubble of human intellect, human insight, when in reality, I believe that you have to think outside that bubble of expansion. You have to think outside that bubble, and that Christianity and God has the truth of that. He's outside of this bubble, revealing things to us, and we don't have to stick inside this bubble of realization. So it's kind of this high sounding knowledge and theory, but it's all human. So I think you have to go outside of that for philosophy. So that's kind of just my quick take on philosophy. But just a few of the answers that I really liked from the podcast I want to list out real quick. So one of them was Terence Irwin's answer. He said, philosophy is an argument from things that seem perfectly obvious to a conclusion that's extremely surprising, a way to try to get clear about the basic presuppositions of claims that we tend to take for granted. So I like this because it's things that people just normally don't even think about, and then saying, hey, wait, let's dive into that more. What is there to that? Another one, Richard Bradley, 99% about critical reflection about anything you could care to be interested in. So once again, I like that because it's kind of taking philosophy into everything. How can you philosophize about anything you could be interested in and then just dissecting it? Another one, this plays right along, thinking that's obsessed with clarity. Then I think maybe my favorite definition that fits for what I like is Janet Radcliffe Richards' answer. She says, philosophy is to her more a mode of inquiry rather than a particular set of subjects. I love that because it's saying that there are so many things that you could dive into with kind of the mindset of philosophizing over things. So you see something that seems basic to everyone else, but then once you get into it and you really dive deep, what are the thoughts and processes that are going into this, that love of the knowledge of getting into those things, and not just this high abstract idea of philosophy. So those are kind of my quick takeaways from the podcast and article. Highly recommend listening to it and forming your own thoughts, and let me know what your thoughts of philosophy are.